The gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Whispering Pines, causing Margaret Nichols to stumble and drop her wedding bouquet, her chestnut hair falling loose as the ribbon that held it tore against the rough wooden post she grabbed for support. She had never imagined her wedding day would end like this, with her groom lying dead in the dirt and her carefully arranged hair coming undone before the entire town. The year was 1876, and Margaret had traveled all the way from Boston to marry a man she had corresponded with for 8 months. Edward Blackburn had seemed like a gentleman in his letters, promising her a good life in the Montana Territory. What he hadn't mentioned was his gambling debts or the men who would come collecting on her wedding day. "Look at the fancy Eastern bride now," someone called from the gathering crowd, pointing and laughing at her disheveled appearance. "Not so proper anymore, are you?" Margaret's face burned with shame as she tried to gather her torn hair ribbon, the silk now soiled with dust. The carefully crafted-up dough her landlady had helped her with that morning was ruined, loose strands falling around her shoulders. The crowd had begun to disperse, some whispering, others openly mocking her predicament. "Somebody get the undertaker," the sheriff called, kneeling beside Edward's body. "And somebody help Miss Nichols, for heaven's sake." From the shadows of the saloon stepped Victor Dawson, a tall cowboy with sun-weathered skin and sharp blue eyes. Unlike the others, he didn't laugh or turn away. Instead, he walked straight toward Margaret, removing his hat as he approached. "Madam," he said softly, kneeling down beside her as she clutched at the torn ribbon, "please allow me to help you." Margaret looked up, tears streaming down her face. "My ribbon," she whispered, holding up the tattered silk. "It was my mother's." Victor gently took the torn ribbon from her trembling hands. "This isn't just a ribbon, madam. To the right eyes, it's a crown, and you're wearing it like royalty." The crowd had grown quiet, watching this unexpected interaction. Victor helped Margaret to her feet, keeping his voice low. "Let's get you somewhere quiet. You've been through enough for one day." Margaret allowed him to lead her away from the church steps, away from her dead fiancé, away from the prying eyes of a town that had already judged her. As they walked, Victor kept her torn ribbon carefully folded in his palm. Victor guided Margaret to the small boarding house where she had been staying since arriving in Whispering Pines 3 days ago. Mrs. Holloway, the proprietress, rushed forward when she saw Margaret's state. "Goodness gracious, child, what happened?" "I heard gunshots." "Edward's dead," Margaret said, her voice hollow. "Shot down on our wedding day." "Those gambling debts finally caught up to him," Victor explained. "Calhoun and his boys showed up demanding payment." Mrs. Holloway clicked her tongue. "I warned that man. I warned him good and proper." She turned to Margaret. "Come inside, dear. We'll get you cleaned up." "Thank you for bringing her, Mr. Dawson," the older woman said with a knowing look at Victor. "It's the least I could do, madam." He turned to Margaret. "Miss Nichols, if you need anything at all, I'm just up the road at the Dawson Ranch. My foreman can point you in my direction." Margaret nodded numbly, allowing Mrs. Holloway to lead her inside. Just before entering, she turned back. "My ribbon." Victor held it out and their fingers brushed as she took it. "Remember what I said, it's not torn, it's just got character now." For the first time that day, Margaret felt a flicker of something other than despair. The next morning, Margaret awoke to find herself in an impossible situation. She was alone in a frontier town, her fiancé dead, her savings nearly depleted from the journey west, and no way to return to Boston. Her parents had passed 2 years ago, leaving her with few options back east. Coming west to marry Edward had been her chance for a new beginning. She dressed slowly, pinning her hair as best she could, though without her mother's ribbon to hold it properly. A knock at her door revealed Mrs. Holloway with a breakfast tray. "Thought you might prefer to eat up here today," the older woman said kindly. "The dining room's full of gossips." "Thank you." Margaret accepted the tray. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm not sure what to do now. I don't have enough money for a return ticket." The older woman sat on the edge of the bed. "Whispering Pines isn't Boston, dear, but it's not without opportunities." The school teacher left last month to get married. Town council's been looking for a replacement. I was a teacher in Boston, Margaret said, hope flickering briefly. I thought as much. You've got that scholarly look about you. Mrs. Holloway patted her hand. Rest today. Tomorrow we'll speak to Mayor Wilson. After breakfast, Margaret ventured downstairs, ignoring the whispers that followed her. She stepped outside onto the porch, breathing in the crisp Montana air. The town spread before her, so different from Boston's crowded streets, open, wild, and unforgiving. Miss Nichols? She turned to find Victor Dawson approaching on horseback. He dismounted in one fluid motion, tying his horse to the hitching post. Mr. Dawson, I came to check on you. He removed his hat. And to bring you this. From his pocket, he withdrew her ribbon, but it was different now. The torn edges had been carefully mended with tiny, precise stitches. You fixed it, Margaret whispered, taking it with trembling fingers. My mother taught me to sew before she passed. Said a man on his own needs to know such things. His smile was slight but warm. It's not perfect, but it should hold. It's better than perfect, Margaret said, running her finger along the careful stitches. How can I thank you? No need for thanks. I was hoping I might escort you to Edward's funeral this afternoon. No one should have to face such things alone. The funeral was a sparse affair. Few in town had truly known Edward Blackburn, and fewer still mourned him. Margaret stood beside a freshly dug grave, her hair neatly arranged with the mended ribbon, Victor a steady presence at her side. As the preacher spoke words over the simple coffin, Margaret felt oddly detached. She had traveled thousands of miles to marry a man she had known only through letters, and now she realized she hadn't known him at all. You doing all right? Victor whispered. I'm wondering if I'm a terrible person, she confessed. I barely knew him. That doesn't make you terrible. Makes you honest. After the service, Victor walked Margaret back to the boarding house, their pace unhurried. Mrs. Holloway mentioned the town needs a teacher, Margaret said. I'm considering applying. You'd be good at it. I've seen you with books in the general store. Your eyes light up. Margaret looked at him in surprise. You notice that? I notice a lot of things about you, Miss Nichols. There was something in his tone that made her heart beat faster. Tell me about your ranch, Mr. Dawson. It's small compared to some, but it's mine. My father started it, and I took over when he passed 5 years ago. We raise cattle mostly, some horses too, he smiled. And please call me Victor. Then you must call me Margaret. They had reached the boarding house steps. Margaret hesitated, not wanting their conversation to end. Would you like to come in for coffee? I would, but I've got to get back. Cattle don't wait for social calls. He replaced his hat. But I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you to the town social on Saturday, if it's not too soon, that is. I'd like that, Margaret said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Over the next few days, Margaret settled into a new routine. Mayor Wilson had been delighted to find a qualified teacher and offered her the position immediately. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building, but it was clean and well supplied. She would start the following Monday with 15 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Mrs. Holloway helped her find a small cabin to rent, closer to the school and more affordable than the boarding house. It was sparse but sturdy, with a garden plot that lay dormant but promising. It needs a woman's touch, Mrs. Holloway said as they surveyed the cabin's interior, but it has good bones. Like me, Margaret joked, surprising herself. It was the first time she had felt light-hearted since arriving in Whispering Pines. As Saturday approached, Margaret found herself anticipating the social with unexpected eagerness. She washed her best dress, the one she'd intended to wear for her first Sunday as a married woman, and pressed it carefully. She arranged her hair with the mended ribbon, which now seemed more precious than when it had been perfect. Victor arrived precisely at 7. Wearing a clean shirt and vest, his usual cowboy hat replaced with a more formal one. You look beautiful, he said, his eyes warm as they took in her appearance. That ribbon suits you. Thank you for fixing it. It means more to me than I can say. The The social was held in the town hall, which had been decorated with paper streamers and lanterns. A small band played lively tunes, and tables laden with food lined one wall. As they entered, Margaret was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. "Don't mind them," Victor said quietly. "Small towns run on gossip, but they forget quickly enough when something new comes along." "And what will be the new gossip?" Margaret asked. "That the new schoolteacher is being courted by the Dawson Ranch owner, I imagine." Margaret's cheeks flushed. "Is that what you're doing, courting me, if you'll permit it?" His blue eyes were serious now. "I know it's soon, and I know you came here expecting a different life, but I'd very much like the chance to know you better, Margaret." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by a booming voice. "Dawson, finally decided to join society, have you?" A tall, barrel-chested man approached, his hand extended. "And this must be our new schoolteacher." "Margaret, this is Henry Wilson, our mayor, Mayor Wilson, Miss Margaret Nichols." "A pleasure, my dear. We're delighted to have you join our community." He lowered his voice. "And may I say, you've shown remarkable fortitude in the face of tragedy." "Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking forward to starting at the school on Monday." "Excellent, excellent. The children need a steady hand." He glanced at Victor. "And it seems you found a steady hand of your own already." After the mayor moved on, Victor guided Margaret toward the dance floor. "May I have this dance?" "I'd be delighted." As they danced, Margaret was conscious of the stares, some curious, some disapproving. She recognized several women who had laughed at her torn ribbon just days ago. "They're watching us," she whispered. "Let them watch. I'm only interested in your opinion, not theirs." The music changed to a slower waltz, and Victor drew her closer, his hand warm at her waist. "You dance beautifully." "My mother insisted on dancing lessons. She said a lady must always know how to waltz." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." She would have liked you." The words slipped out before Margaret could consider them. Victor's eyes softened. "I hope I would have earned her approval." As the evening progressed, Margaret found herself relaxing, enjoying Victor's company and the simple pleasure of the dance. He introduced her to ranchers and townspeople, many of whom welcomed her warmly, apparently untroubled by her quick transition from grieving bride to social attendee. Later, as Victor walked her home beneath a star-filled sky, Margaret felt a peace she hadn't expected to find so soon. "Thank you for tonight," she said as they reached her cabin. "I didn't expect to enjoy myself." "You deserve joy, Margaret. What happened wasn't your fault." She touched the ribbon in her hair. "When they laughed at me with my ribbon torn and my hair falling down, I felt so humiliated, but when you said it was a crown to you," she swallowed. "No one has ever made me feel valuable just as I am." Victor stepped closer, his hand gently touching her cheek. "May I kiss you goodnight?" Margaret nodded, her heart racing as he leaned down. The kiss was gentle, a whisper of promise rather than demand. When they parted, she felt dizzy with possibility. "Good night, Margaret. Good night, Victor." Monday morning brought new challenges as Margaret faced her classroom for the first time. The children regarded her with various expressions: curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases, outright defiance. She recognized several from the social, including a lanky teenage boy who slouched in the back row. "Good morning," she began, summoning the confidence she had developed in Boston. "I am Miss Nichols, and I will be your teacher." A small girl in the front row raised her hand immediately. "Miss Nichols, is it true you were almost married but your husband got shot?" Margaret took a deep breath. "Yes, Emily, that is true, but that is not what we are here to discuss. Today we will begin with arithmetic." The morning progressed with its share of challenges. The older boys tested her authority and the younger children were easily distracted. By noon, Margaret was questioning her decision to stay in Whispering Pines. As the children filed out for their lunch break, the sullen teenager from the back row lingered. "Miss Nichols." "Yes, Timothy, isn't it?" "Yes, madam, I just wanted to say." He shuffled his feet. "Mr. Dawson is a good man. My pa works for him, and he says there's not a fairer boss in the territory." Margaret was startled by this unexpected testimonial. "Thank you, Timothy, that's kind of you to share." Just thought you should know." With that, he hurried out, leaving Margaret to ponder this insight into Victor's character. The afternoon went more smoothly, and by the end of the day, Margaret felt she had established at least a foundation of respect with her students. As she was gathering her things to leave, she heard a horse outside and looked up to see Victor dismounting. "How was your first day?" he asked, smiling as she came outside. "Challenging, rewarding, exhausting." She returned his smile. "What brings you to town?" "Thought you might appreciate a ride home, and maybe dinner. I had Mrs. Peterson at the cafe pack us a basket." "That sounds wonderful." As they rode toward her cabin, Victor's arm secure around her waist, Margaret felt a contentment she hadn't expected to find so quickly after disaster. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Margaret taught during the day, gradually winning the respect and affection of her students. In the evenings, Victor often called on her, bringing small gifts: wildflowers, a book of poetry, once a kitten from his barn that now slept contentedly by her stove. On Sundays, they rode to church together, ignoring the occasional disapproving glance from those who thought Margaret should observe a longer period of mourning for a man she had barely known. But most of the town had accepted their courtship, seeing in it a practical solution to two problems: the town's need for a teacher and Victor Dawson's notorious bachelorhood. As spring blossomed into summer, Margaret's garden flourished under her care, mirroring her own growth in this new place. She had come to love the vast openness of Montana, so different from Boston's crowded streets. She loved the way the sunset painted the mountains purple and gold, the way wildflowers carpeted the prairie after rain, the way the stars seemed close enough to touch. Most of all, she had come to love Victor Dawson with his quiet strength and unexpected tenderness. She loved the way he listened when she spoke of her dreams, the way he respected her independence even as he protected her, the way he always noticed when she wore her mother's ribbon. "You're wearing your crown today," he said one warm June evening as they sat on her porch swing. The ribbon held back her hair, its mended seam now a cherished detail rather than a flaw. "It felt like a crown day," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Every day is a crown day with you." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Margaret, I have something to ask you." She looked up at him, her heart suddenly racing. "Yes. I know we've only known each other a few months, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life." He shifted to face her fully. "I love you, Margaret Nichols. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you faced tragedy and chose to build something new instead of giving up. I love watching you with your students, seeing how you inspire them." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained, "like your ribbon was yours." "Yes," Margaret whispered. "Yes, Victor, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she added, "But I'd like to wait until the school term ends in August. I promised the children I'd finish the year." "I'd wait forever for you," he said, drawing her close for a kiss that sealed their promise. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Whispering Pines. Most offered congratulations, though a few still whispered about the propriety of Margaret marrying so soon after Edward's death. "Let them talk," Victor said when Margaret mentioned the gossip. "We know what's in our hearts." July brought scorching heat and the annual Independence Day celebration. The entire town gathered for a picnic in the meadow by the creek, with games for the children, a shooting contest for the men, and pie judging for the women. Margaret sat with several of the ranch wives, many of whom had become friends in the month since her arrival. "When's the big day?" asked Sarah Peterson, wife of Victor's foreman. "August 25th, the Saturday after school ends. You'll make a beautiful bride," Sarah said, then hesitated. "And a much more suitable one for Victor than some might have expected." "What do you mean?" Sarah glanced around before lowering her voice. "There's been talk that Catherine Miller had her sights set on Victor for years. Her father owns the largest ranch in the county, and they always assumed Victor would eventually propose. Margaret had met Catherine Miller, a beautiful blonde woman who always seemed to regard Margaret with thinly veiled hostility. Victor never mentioned any understanding between them. There wasn't one, not officially, but Catherine assumed and her father encouraged the assumption. Sarah patted Margaret's hand. "Don't worry about it. Victor never showed any interest in her despite her father's best efforts." The conversation shifted to wedding plans, but Margaret's thoughts remained troubled. She had noticed Catherine watching her and Victor at church and town gatherings, but had attributed it to the same curiosity others showed toward the Eastern bride, who had lost one groom only to find another so quickly. Later that afternoon, as the women were setting out food for the communal dinner, Catherine approached Margaret. "Miss Nichols, may I speak with you privately?" Apprehensive but unwilling to show it, Margaret followed Catherine to a quiet spot beneath a cottonwood tree. "I understand congratulations are in order," Catherine said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "You've managed to secure quite a catch in Victor Dawson." "I love Victor," Margaret said simply. "I'm sure you do. What woman wouldn't love a man with the finest cattle operation in the county?" Catherine's voice hardened. "But do you really think you're suited to be a rancher's wife, a delicate Eastern flower like yourself?" Margaret felt her temper rising but kept her voice steady. "I appreciate your concern, Miss Miller, but Victor and I understand each other perfectly." "Do you?" "Did he tell you that before you arrived, our fathers had all but arranged our match?" Catherine stepped closer. "Did he tell you that he only started pursuing you to avoid his obligation to me?" "There was no obligation, Catherine." Victor's voice came from behind them. He moved to stand beside Margaret, his expression grim. "I never made you any promises." Catherine's face flushed. "Your father and mine, our fathers discussed many things, but I never agreed to any of them." Victor's tone was firm but not unkind. "I'm sorry if you misunderstood, but my heart belongs to Margaret. It has from the moment I saw her." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Without another word, she turned and hurried away. "I'm sorry about that," Victor said, turning to Margaret. "I should have warned you about Catherine's expectations." "Were they just her expectations?" Margaret asked quietly. "Or was there more to it?" Victor took her hands. "Our fathers were friends, and they often spoke of joining our ranches through marriage. But I never encouraged Catherine's interest. I was focused on building my ranch, not finding a wife." His eyes softened. "Until you came along and changed everything." Margaret believed him, but the encounter left her unsettled. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to marry into the established social structure of this small community. She would be taking a place that others had assumed would be filled differently. The remaining weeks before the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The school term ended with a celebration, and Margaret's students presented her with a handmade quilt, each child having contributed a square. "So you remember us when you're Mrs. Dawson," explained Emily, the little girl who had asked about Edward on Margaret's first day. "I could never forget any of you," Margaret assured them, touched by their gesture. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Mrs. Holloway helped Margaret dress in a new gown of ivory silk, simpler than the one she had worn for her aborted wedding to Edward, but far more suited to her now. "Your hair looks lovely," Mrs. Holloway said as she arranged the last strands. "That ribbon really does look like a crown on you." Margaret touched the mended ribbon, which now seemed perfect in its imperfection. "Victor said that to me the day we met, that it was a crown to him." "That man saw your true worth from the beginning," Mrs. Holloway said with approval. "Not many would have." The church was filled with townsfolk and ranchers from the surrounding area. As Margaret walked down the aisle alone, she saw not pity or mockery in their faces, but genuine happiness for her and Victor. Even Catherine Miller sat quietly in the back, her expression resigned if not entirely welcoming. Victor waited for her at the altar, his eyes never leaving her face as she approached. When she reached him, he whispered, "You look like a queen with your crown." The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of love, respect, and partnership. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Victor kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to Margaret's eyes. The reception was held at the Dawson Ranch, which was now Margaret's home as well. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food contributed by neighbors and friends. A fiddle player struck up a lively tune, and Victor led Margaret in their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy?" he asked, his arms strong around her. "Beyond words," she replied. "I never imagined when I stepped off that stagecoach that I would find this kind of happiness here. When I saw you that day, with your hair coming loose and that torn ribbon in your hands, I thought you were the most beautiful, courageous woman I'd ever seen." His eyes were serious. "I knew right then that I wanted to be the man who helped you pick up the pieces." "You did more than help me," Margaret said softly. "You showed me that sometimes what seems broken can become something even more precious." As the sun set over the Montana hills, casting golden light across the celebration, Margaret looked around at the community that had become her own. These people had witnessed her at her lowest moment, mocked her torn ribbon and fallen hair, but now they celebrated her joy. And Victor, her cowboy, her husband, had seen beyond that moment of humiliation to the woman she truly was. He had taken a torn ribbon and made it into a crown, had taken a broken dream and helped her build a new one. As they danced beneath the stars, Margaret knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Their love, like her mended ribbon, might bear the marks of life's hardships, but those marks only made it stronger, more beautiful, more uniquely theirs. Many years later, when their children asked about their courtship, Victor would always tell the story of the bride with the torn hair ribbon and how he had recognized a queen in disguise. "Your mother wore a crown that day," he would say, his eyes meeting Margaret's across the room. "And she's worn it every day since." And Margaret, touching the faded ribbon that she still treasured, would smile and say, "It takes the right eyes to see a crown where others see only something torn."